Let's bring back the front bench to talk about all of that. Brian Gallant, Corey Tenayk, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benzie. Corey, I'll start with you. Make it make sense. I don't know what else to say. 45-minute meeting after the telegraphing ahead of it was, nothing's going to happen. It's going to be very brief. The three of them in a room with no staff. Nothing really out of that meeting tangible like that we're talking about today. What do you make of it all?
Well, what's one to make of it? Like, I don't know. What would I say? Donald Trump, has got 1,000 problems right now, and Canada ain't one of them. Since Gallup started doing presidential polling, he's hit, I think, a new low for any U.S. president at this point in their administration at 36% support. I think he is in a very weakened position. Almost across the board. The off-cycle elections did not go well for the Republican Party, largely because of the president and his agenda, and one of the most unpopular portions of that being the tariffs. I think he's facing a high prospect of a Supreme Court striking down a number of his tariff measures, which I think would be yet another devastating blow for his administration. And you're seeing him having to do his taco. Trump always chickens out on another whole range of tariffs because of the unpopularity of rising domestic prices on foodstuffs. And now he's talking about tariffing fertilizer, Canadian fertilizer, much of which, unless they're going to discover potash where they haven't yet in the United States, is coming from the blessed land of Saskatchewan. I don't see an alternative for them. So what does that do? It raises food prices even more. Trump is in a lot of trouble. He's in a lot of trouble on a lot of issues. And I think the best thing that Carney and the Canadian negotiating team can do is be very busy doing other things, like getting trade deals with other people around the world, and allow political gravity to bring the president down to something more approaching planet Earth.
Do you think we can count on that political gravity, though, Brian? And I think Corey lays it out very well, right? Like, it is all pulling in a downward direction. But at times, that hasn't mattered to Trump.
You're absolutely right to say that. And I think we have seen Trump deny what are sort of the adages of politics and just basically go against the grain of what we're all used to and somehow be somewhat successful, at least winning 2 elections in doing so. So, look, I think Corey's laying out of the land of where things stand is accurate, and I certainly hope that's the case. And a weakened position with him would, I think, bolster our chances of having a deal for Canada that would work well for our economy. But look, as you kind of are hinting at in your question, Vash, I mean, he has sort of defied the odds. He has sort of gone against the grain on almost anything and everything that we've ever thought would stop him or at least nick him, and it never seems to. And whether it's because he is able to do things a different way that we're not used to, or whether it's because he just doesn't care and he just keeps moving forward and plows forward, and then there's consequences for others. I don't know. But arguably, it's all, maybe coming to a bit of a halt, or at least a slowdown based on the terrain that Corey laid out, but also because we would, in historic times, see a bit of a lame duck president fairly soon. But again, I mean, it goes back to your question. He's bucked the trend so many times. I don't think we can count on that. But nevertheless, I think that the idea that he still says he likes the prime minister, we'll see. Is certainly, it's not no certainty there. But I think we've all seen the president talk about Canada and talk about other countries in a much more bombastic way. So I guess relatively speaking, that's not bad. So as Corey pointed out, maybe he just has other fishes to fry at the moment, and it's just we're not top of mind, which maybe isn't a bad thing.
Well, and sort of that lends itself to, I think, what's emerging as a more clear picture of what will happen, let's say, from the domestic perspective, Tom, which is, there's nobody rushing to make some sort of big deal with the U.S. president, but that means that those sectoral tariffs remain in place, and then they'll have to focus on what they do, like last week in the case of Algoma, how they keep those sectors afloat, if in fact that is the objective. For how long is that arrangement politically palatable?
I think that it's really starting to hit home with the average American that tariffs are hurting the average American. Donald Trump is a really good salesman, and he's like a Carney barker. He's got a cure for everything, and you've got to listen to him, and he keeps explaining, and sometimes it works. But it's not Canadian companies. It's not Canadian governments that are paying the tariffs that will be imposed on potash. It's American consumers, because farmers use potash as part of their fertilizers on every single acre of field producing food in the U.S. So it might be a bit hard for somebody to understand that the reason their pickup truck is now costing thousands of dollars more is because steel is being tariffed, and as it comes into the States, it goes into those products like pickup trucks and cars, and they are paying for it. And Trump needed that money so he could give tax breaks to the richest Americans. That's complicated. Food is not complicated. If somebody explains to you that because Trump, and we've got to hold on to that clip forever, Trump's sitting there promising, we can produce more fertilizer. I love that. Never lose that one. But that's exactly what he does all the time. And here, the average American can say, hold on, if the Canadians had decided to put an export tax on potash, we would have been railing, saying it's going to raise the price of food in the United States. But somehow Trump believes that he's going to be able to con people into understanding that it's okay to tariff, it's turned into a verb, to tariff potash that goes into the American foods production system and that American consumers are going to be paying for. It's madness, but it exposes Trump much more than the more arcane world of metal productions and such. This everybody gets, Vashti, simply because they go to the supermarket and they know their food's costing more because of Donald Trump.
Benzie, what do you think?
No, Tom and Corey and Brian are exactly right, Vashti. I mean, Donald Trump had to give a $12 billion bailout to American farmers because of his tariff policy today. So I don't understand how when they get 80% of the potash that they use, 80% of the fertilizer they use, comes from raw materials from Saskatchewan, Corey's home province. It is so bizarre to me that they think they can invent a solution. I mean, I think part of the problem is that it's not exactly like the president is surrounded by a top-notch crew of really crackerjack advisors. He's surrounded by grifters, sycophants, second-raters. These are not people. He's not even surrounded with anyone who was in his first administration, which is, if you think about that, that's astounding. So he's not getting good advice. Not that he would take it if he did, I guess. I think we should do what our friend David Frum recommended and just bide our time, and negotiate with Donald Trump next year when he's in an even weaker position. Because, as Brian said, he is a lame duck. The midterms next year will be a bloodbath. Even if the Democrats continue to shoot themselves in the foot on certain issues, it doesn't matter. The hatred of Donald Trump, as Corey pointed out, he's underwater in the polls, and it will just mount as. They're suppressing the release of data about prices and employment. What does that tell you? That tells you that he doesn't want people to know how bad it is, even though all they have to do is go into their neighborhood Tops-friendly market in Buffalo and see how bad it is.
I just have 30 seconds left, Corey. I just wanted to swing back. The question I had earlier was like, how politically palatable is that, though? For how long? Like, we're holding out while these sectors still retain all this damage. Like, you're in Ontario. The premier is, like, vocal there about the auto sector. Like, how long does that last?
Spin up another ad. That's what I say. Look, I think it's palatable. I think, look, people, I think, want to see this work out well for Canada. And I think we're looking at a potential with some of these tariffs being overturned by the Supreme Court. The worst thing Canada could do was agree to some kind of deal where those are imposed upon ourselves through a voluntary agreement for a prolonged period of time in order to get through the next 6 or 8 months. I just don't think that makes any sense. Trump is in trouble right now. I think we should just let him be in trouble. It's kind of a version of what we were talking about with a good strategy for the Conservatives. Time, give them more rope, give them more line, whatever analogy you want, and bide our time on this, because it looks like things are trending in a positive direction. It'd be a mistake to go to the table now.
All right. Well, thank you all for your time tonight. I appreciate it. Our wonderful front bench, Brian Gallant, Corey Tonight, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benzie.